Hello, and welcome back to Ruben Uncut. Today I'm talking about Roadhouse and positive masculinity. That's right, I'm talking about Roadhouse and positive masculinity. Why am I talking about this? Well, two things. One, this is also kind of a review for both Roadhouses, and by that I mean the original with Patrick Swayze and the remake with Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, these are two movies. Roadhouse is considered an 80s classic, and I won't lie to you, I watched it this week for the first time ever. Never seen it before. It never really struck my interest. It just looked like another, just looked like a cheesy 80s action movie that didn't star any of the cheesy 80s action heroes who I had been programmed to enjoy as a child. People like Schwarzenegger or Chuck Norris or any of those types. Now let's start. Patrick Swayze, someone I really, I'll be real, I have not seen a lot of Patrick Swayze movies. And no, I mean, yes, Ghost is one of the ones I haven't seen. Patrick Swayze is weird because I look at his filmography and it's like he played two very distinctive things that I think is what made him so popular. He played action heroes for men in movies like Roadhouse or Red Dawn, and he played romantic leads for people for movies like Dirty Dancing, which is not something that which is sort of interesting because it displays his range as an actor as being different from a lot of people who made his kind of movies. Let's be real. The only Matthew McConaughey action movie I can think of is Reign of Fire. And the only nope, can't think of a single Schwarzenegger rom-com. Do you see what point I'm trying to make here? But let's move along. I never really got Patrick Swayze, but you know what? If I had watched Roadhouse, well, actually, I'm not really sure if I would have gotten Roadhouse as a kid. But honestly, I watched this movie, and honestly, to my surprise, it kind of blew me away. Why? Because Dalton is genuinely one of the most interesting and positive male characters that I've seen in action movies, possibly ever. He is a good dude, even if he knows how to rip out your throat. He is interesting, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Now over here we got Jake Gyllenhaal in the new Roadhouse, and he is kind of a good dude. Um, if I were to give you a short, spoiler-free review for the new Roadhouse, it would be this. It has a very the one thing I'm going to give it is it has a cooler location than the new movie. The Florida Keys, much more interesting to look at, and the action in the movie benefits from being made more recently by a competent action director, Doug Liman. What I'm saying is that the action looks better. Both movies actually have pretty good casts. They both do well in that regard. Here's the thing, though, about New Roadhouse is that New Roadhouse is okay. It's fine. I enjoyed the movie. It was entertaining. I wouldn't mind if they made a sequel. There's maybe it could become something more than it was. But the problem with New Roadhouse is that New Roadhouse does not understand what makes Dalton a great character. You see, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, who is generally a good guy, is technically kind of a dirtbag, especially when compared to original Dalton. New Dalton is kind of a guy with an anger issue. Well, let's go into that. First, I'm going to talk to you about this movie over here because you need to understand original Roadhouse before we can get to what new Roadhouse gets wrong. Okay? First off, Roadhouse, the original, is a kung fu movie. Or you could say martial arts film. Now, some people might argue that it is a Western. And in fairness to Westerns and Kung Fu movies use a lot of the same plot structures frequently because Kung Fu just happened to be the weapon of choice in the Wild West equivalent of Asia. That being said, I consider this to be a Kung Fu movie. Why? Well, because he does fucking Kung Fu in it, guys. What? He does Kung Fu in it. It's a Kung Fu movie. If you don't realize that Kung Fu movies use the same plot structures as Westerns, then I have to assume that you don't watch a lot of Kung Fu movies, which is fine, I guess. But like most of the action in this movie is martial arts fighting. Now, to be fair, most of the action in this movie is also martial arts fighting, but the film still decides to meta commentate that it is like a Western, which it is, but it's also more like a Kung Fu movie. Let's move along. Because I'm not ready to tell you what's wrong with this movie yet, because we have to learn about Dalton. This is very important. So we meet Dalton at the beginning of the movie. At first, he's a mysterious, stoic fella. In line with kung fu ethics and philosophy, though, or I should say martial arts philosophy, the film starts with essentially a retelling of an old samurai story. I understand samurais don't do kung fu. Please don't bother me about it. Moving along. But this is also a story I think Bruce Lee told a version of. Actually, this thing happens. I'm sorry. This Bruce Lee also used this story, or sort of reenacted this story in his in one of his movies also, Enter the Dragon, in case you're wondering. But anyways, the way the story goes is that there's a samurai, and one day another guy challenges him to a duel, essentially. And the samurai says, okay, well, because they're on a boat at the time. He's like, all right, well, let's take these small boats and then we'll take them over to that island over there, and then we can have our duel there. So the other guy gets in a boat and goes over to the island, and then the samurai just sits down on the, and then the samurai just doesn't go after him. And someone's like, why'd you do that? And he's like, I'm not just gonna go to an island and fight that guy. Are you crazy? That's not what the samurai said. I'm paraphrasing. But the point is that you should never fight, you should never partake in any fight that you can avoid. And this film starts with showing us that. Essentially, what happens is Dalton, he essentially goes, he is a bouncer at a bar, what they refer to in the movie as a cooler, which I guess means head bouncer, because that's essentially what he does. In this movie, we see him help to break up a fight of these guys who are harassing women. Now, when he's breaking up this fight, the guy pulls a knife on him and says, "I think I could take you, Dalton." And Dalton basically is like, "Why don't you?" And Dalton's like, "Oh yeah, you want to take me? Let's go outside." Except he doesn't say quite as much as that because Dalton is a stoic man, a few words, but basically says that he's going to meet him outside. And so they all walk outside and they all stand there, and the guy gets ready to fight him. And then Dalton just turns around and walks back in as a line of bouncers block the door. Because Dalton knows that there is no fight worth just having for a fight. If he can get out of a fight, he'll get out of a fight. And the thing is that this is not cowardice, this is wisdom. This is the type of wisdom that goes into martial arts theory and philosophy that we are lacking these days. You know what? I am going to talk about New Roadhouse. The comparison to comparison thing is probably the best way to go with this, anyways. So over here at Roadhouse, the new one, our introduction to the character is a little bit different. We see this guy who is clearly living in his car, and he's about to go do a cage fight against Post Malone. But he gets into the cage fight, and Post Malone recognizes him and then won't fight him, so he gets to take the money and leave. He gets outside, and the guy who lost money stabs him with a knife, at which point he looks at him and says, "Is this going how you planned it or something?" Or did you really think this through? And the guy runs away in fear. And you see, this is the thing. Right here, we begin to see a basic difference in how these characters are portrayed and how they operate in the world. Dalton OG here is someone who will use his brain to get out of fights or to maneuver his way around things. This Dalton is a beast. This Dalton, people are afraid of him because he once killed someone in the ring. Now, this is interesting because the major difference between these movies is that this is essentially a movie about an MMA fighter, and this is a story about a guy, a highly intelligent man who does kung fu, but chooses to work in a bar so he can help protect people. Also because he has a degree in philosophy. That's the other thing. This Dalton is a scholar. He is an educated man with a degree in philosophy, who also studies kung fu and realizes that kung fu is his major workable skill, or something he can use to make money. So he works as a bouncer at bars, which makes total sense when you consider that both Roadhouse movies are about a bouncer at a bar. What's interesting is that one character trait here has been changed, has been altered to update the time, and it actually kind of breaks the character. Sure, Jake Gyllenhaal doing MMA is more modern, it's more contemporary, it updates the character to our times, but it also neuters the character in many ways. Because you see, the thing that makes Dalton interesting is his philosophies, his sense of ethics, and right and wrong. This Jake Gyllenhaal's character is harder to read because he doesn't really display the same sensibilities. And when shit goes down, he is a darker person. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Back to OG one here, over here. OG Dalton, of course, after this sequence, is approached by a man whose business is in trouble. His bar is doing bad. He has all types of problematic customers who make his life a living hell. He's also being exploited through a protection racket, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. He hires Dalton. Dalton sets his own rate and agrees to go. On his way to go do this job, here's the thing. This Dalton gives his old car to a homeless man, pulls out in a car he's clearly been saving money for out of his garage, and drives down to take the job right away, which he set on his own financial terms. And he saw as a great opportunity to go somewhere and get paid more to do what he already does, especially if it's only temporary. This guy, now, it's worth noting, this is important, that he initially tries to tell the person to go hire his old mentor, played by Sam Elliott. And the guy says, your mentor's old, I want to hire you. He sets the rate, and he takes the job. Gives away his old car, drives out of there in a car he's clearly been saving because apparently he's smart enough to take care of his money. Also, he's very not materialistic, but we'll get to that in a second here. Meanwhile, over here with this Jake Gyllenhaal feller, he is just, First of all, he tells the lady to hire Post Malone's character, who is who she came to see in the first place, even though there's no reason to believe that hiring Post Malone's character, who ran like a bitch from him, would even be able to solve her problems. Also, why is she going to hire cage fighters instead of a bouncer? I mean, maybe that's a bad sign, but let's move along. Turns her down with a knife wound, I might add. But turns her down, doesn't want to do it. Then, on his way out of there, he parks his car on a train track, and for a moment, you're like, oh shit, he's trying to kill himself. And for a moment, it looks like that's what he's doing. But he chickens out of killing himself with the train and his car won't start. And he pulls out and the car just like the train hits the back of his car. He's fine, but his car is wrecked. So he has to take a bus to Florida. Are you starting to see the picture that I'm painting here? See, by making him an MMA fighter, we have dramatically changed everything about his character. It wasn't normal in the 80s for people to study Kung Fu. I mean, it was more popular, but it wasn't like the average person just knew Kung Fu. Taking Kung Fu is a choice that he came to probably through studying philosophy. There's no reason that can't be part of the modern character. I understand the things you're doing here, but I think they ruined Dalton. I have no problem with this being a different Dalton or something. I don't know. The film is clearly taking its cues from the original, but let's move along. Upon arriving at his new destination, which I can't remember where it is, to be honest, this OG Dalton over here essentially discovers the bar. He goes in, he cleans house, he fires everyone who is doing anything that he finds objectionable because he has strict standards for conduct in the workplace. So he kicks out anyone selling drugs. He fires the bartender for skimming money. He starts laying down the law, setting a standard, an example of things that he would never ask anyone to do that he wasn't asking of himself. He then goes and rents an apartment above a barn on the land of a farmer. And the farmer makes a comment about how, like, he understands that he might not want the place because it has no TV, no phone, and no air conditioning. These things aren't a problem for OG Dalton. OG Dalton isn't a materialist. He doesn't need lots of things. He just needs a quiet place where he can sit and read at night. And of course, practice Kung Fu. He befriends the farmer, and then he also befriends some people at the bar, and he befriends some people in town. Specifically, he befriends this divorcee who runs a hardware store. There's a little joke in the movie where he makes a joke about how he married an ugly woman and then she left him for someone even uglier than her. But at some point, Dalton sees a photo of him with his ex-wife, and his ex-wife is not ugly. She's actually very attractive. So he's just coping. But Dalton gets a feel for this small town, small business owner, and he becomes friends with both him and of course the farmer who he rents from. Meanwhile, Jake Gyllenhaal's character over here, New Dalton, ends up actually, you know what? We'll use his first name, Elwood over here. Elwood, because he's called Elwood Dalton. I don't actually remember if they ever say what this Dalton's real first name is. Everyone just calls him Dalton the whole time, I think. I mean, they may have said it, but I missed it. But Elwood over here, he arrives in Florida by bus, befriends black teenage girl who works at a bookstore with her dad. And she gives him a Florida trivia book, which, in fairness, becomes his only real source of entertainment when he moves into a houseboat owned by the person who owns the bar. In this universe, the person who owns the bar is a younger black woman. Well, I shouldn't say younger black woman. She's just younger than the old guy in this movie, in the original movie. And there's actually a nice little backstory with her about how, like, her dad had built the bar, and she's determined to save it. Like, the thing is, I don't hate this movie. I want to be clear about that. That's not my problem with the movie. The movie is generally entertaining. It's got some good characters and some good action. It just pales in comparison to this for reasons I'm hoping I'm illustrating to you in some way. But anyways, somehow this movie is longer but has significantly fewer characters. Don't know why or how that happened. But he befriends all the people at the bar here. Now, I will say, like the people who work at the bar here are not quite as interesting. There's just like the one good-looking white guy and the skinny young black guy and the band. In this movie, Dalton in the OG Dalton actually is friends with the blind like lap steel guitarist from the who is the band in the first movie, in the original here. And that's actually really interesting. Like that's who told them about him. Um, and there's a nice relationship between them. Over here, we don't really get to meet the band as much in New Roadhouse. We kind of get to meet the waiters, the waitresses and whatnot. But like it's weird. There's significantly less characters here. Also, New Roadhouse has a person get eaten by a crocodile, and I'm really confused as to why it's not a gator since they're in Florida. And like I understand they're in the Keys, so I guess like it's mostly saltwater. A crocodile, American crocodiles, I need to specify American crocodiles because this is not true of other countries' crocodiles, typically don't attack human beings. Um, Alligators in America are actually much more dangerous than crocodiles.
Hello, just want to clarify a quick fact check thing on American crocodiles. American crocodiles are actually significantly less dangerous than alligators. However, I may have oversold it slightly. American crocodiles prefer smaller vertebrate prey, but reports of attacks on people are not uncommon. There were approximately 90 people were attacked between 2008 and 2013. Now, it's worth noting, though, that out of 90 attacks, only 20 of them resulted in death, which is actually a decent survival rate for what we're talking about when you think about it. But generally speaking, it is true that they prefer to eat smaller animals and that they do not attack people nearly at the same rates as alligators. That being said, you probably still shouldn't, fuck around with a crocodile.
Now there's a lot of people who work in the bar. In OG Roadhouse, there's a lot of people who work at the bar. And actually, I want to take a moment to just highlight the actually kind of cool positioning of what I can only describe as body positivity. In original Roadhouse, one of the bouncers on the team is a big guy. Like he's a big guy. And the movie does not use him as a punchline. He learns and grows. He's like the main bouncer at certain points, like the go-to bouncer. And in the new movie, that go-to bouncer is a white hot guy. But like the big bouncer in this movie, whose name I don't remember, I'm sorry. Like he's never the punchline. His fatness is never a punchline. There is another fat character too, who's on the bad guy team, like who is kind of who they make fun of, but like not. Well, he's a little bit closer to the negative fat image, but like it's still like could be worse. But essentially, he's also the bad guy. So we make fun of the bad guy, and the good guy, he's just a good guy who happens to be big. That's cool of you, OG Roadhouse. Very cool of you. There's no character like that in here. Now, there is also a romance that exists in both movies between Dalton and a nurse. That romance is way more central to the OG one than I expected. Um, they like it's like she's in a lot of the movie, and they have a lot of screen time together and a lot of development. It's pretty well done. Jake Gyllenhaal also has a nurse who he has a romance with, and it's fine, but like it's somehow not as big a part of the movie. And you know what? I did not mind that it wasn't as big of a part of the movie. I don't know why, but like nothing about this movie made me feel like I needed the romance as much. For some reason, I would say that it's an integral part of the original story here, where he has a very healthy relationship with a woman, or at least as healthy as he can, considering the circumstances that he meets her under.
Holy shit! I can't believe I have to do a fact check here on myself. I'm fact checking myself on a fucking movie. But this one's pretty big. This is a pretty big one, and it's embarrassing. I call her a nurse throughout this video, and that's super fucked. Because she's a full doctor. I don't know what I was thinking when I recorded this, but she is a full ass doctor. Which is actually more points to the movie. That the woman is a full ass doctor, not a nurse. I deeply apologize. I don't know what I swear to God I don't do crack. But if I did do crack, this is where I would blame it for this huge error. I'm just gonna keep making the mistake throughout the video. Just know now that she is a full ass doctor. And I'm not just saying that because in the original we see her ass. But she's a real doctor. She's not a nurse, she's a doctor.
In this movie, the nurse previously dated the main villain, who is a middle-aged, rich-ass white guy who is pretty toxically masculine. He is a bully. He likes to hurt people. He thinks less of anyone he can overpower. He goes hunting for animal. He has a gigantic number of dead animal trophies. And he bullies and abuses even the people who work for him. He is the negative connotation of a boss. Meanwhile, Dalton here is a leader. Another thing is that Dalton knows how to treat women. Dalton in the film is shown to not appreciate when people abuse women, and Dalton is also not pushy for sex. There's a scene where in the first scene where he kisses the nurse, he leans in real slow, so she has an opportunity to pull away. And then he just gets out of the car. There's no need for him to escalate at that moment into a full-blown sexual encounter. They have an actually pretty graphic sex scene later on. Okay, it's not that graphic, but like, you see some boobs, and they definitely seem to be having sex, even if they are wearing convenient amounts of clothes still. This movie, much less sex. Actually, much less nudity in general. Actually, I don't think I saw a single boob in New Roadhouse. Now, Old Roadhouse here, we see some boobage, specifically when they're making love, and also the scene after that where they're both naked. But there's also, what's interesting is the movie also, and I don't think the movie did this on purpose. I don't think this was an intentional positive message. I think this is actually probably just because of the time this movie was made. I'm going to say that this is a juxtapositionally, coincidentally good contrast, which is that other men throughout the movie are shown being very sexualizing to women and abusive towards women. This is behavior that Dalton does not share. Dalton stands up for women. Dalton at one point tries to de-escalate a situation. He is not interested in having people be overly sexual in his bars. He tries to get women not dancing on tables. At one point, the bad guy gets his girlfriend to strip in their bar, and he just casually de-escalates that situation. I shouldn't say casually. It's pretty intentional. But he de-escalates it. That's the point. He's not a number of women try to seduce him throughout the movie, and he never goes for it. Now, to be fair, there are some reasons for this. But generally speaking, he is very respectful to women. There's one point in the movie where you can see a look of regret on his face when he realizes he did not intervene on behalf of a woman's well-being earlier in the film. In that same sequence, we also see how the villain is very abusive towards women and has sort of negative ownership type relationships to them. I don't know if these juxtapositions between these two characters, how intentional it was, but it really does show a big difference in the way that their masculinity is manifesting itself around women. Specifically, Dalton is respectful and ready to essentially be a good guy towards them. Meanwhile, and also Dalton never acts like he owns this woman. Meanwhile, we see our villain, very ownership driven towards women. He hits them. He hits everyone, to be fair. He hits men as just as much. He wants to use physical force and violence to punish people. The villain of this story, the villain of OG, is classically toxically masculine. He's everything that you can think of when it comes to being toxically masculine. And Dalton is the exact opposite. Dalton hates violence. And yet he studies violence. He understands it. Let's cut back here to Elwood. Now, the thing here is that Elton is generally good. Elway here. Elway? Oh my God, I'm fucking it up. Elwood is, well, he's not bad to women. Like, he generally seems pretty respectful to them throughout the film. He doesn't act possessive. Now, to be fair, in keeping with the fact that he is kind of a dirtbag, he initially tries to push off female affection, saying that he is a bad guy, saying that he's not a good guy. But she already knows about the thing that makes him not a good guy. Which brings us to this. A central point to both of these characters is that they are men who have killed. But the movies have different contexts for how they killed someone. And that's also what makes a fundamental difference in their characters. Over here with OG Dalton. OG Dalton is philosophically opposed to just killing people. OG Dalton here doesn't think that violence is very constructive. OG Dalton, however, once tore a man's throat out when that man tried to shoot him in the face with a gun. He killed this man in self-defense. Now, the man was trying to kill him because Dalton had been having an affair with his wife, and the wife had never told him that she had a husband. Dalton ended up killing this man in self-defense. What's interesting is that there's a scene between him and the villain where the villain tries to imply that Dalton killed the man because he wanted to. And the reason for this is because the villain cannot help but feel that Dalton must be like him, that Dalton also must enjoy violence, because the villain does enjoy violence. This is something that is shown to us not just from the way he treats people, but also from his incredibly large number of hunting trophies. He enjoys life and death in that way that Dalton is not interested in. So in his mind, Dalton must have wanted to kill this person. But Dalton didn't want to kill this person. And there's nothing in the movie that implies he did. Dalton regrets killing this person. It's something that haunts him. Now, in fairness to Jake Gyllenhaal's character, he also regrets the life he took. Jake Gyllenhaal's circumstances are significantly different. And I'm really not certain if the film accurately or conveys to me, the audience, how I should view his journey with it. You see, because Elwood Dalton was an MMA fighter who got in the octagon with a person who at one point was his friend, something that really is not properly demonstrated to us in the movie. But let's move along. He got in the ring with a friend. It must have been a title match of some kind. And for some reason, he was mad at his friend. And he lost his temper in the ring and killed his friend in the ring. But you see, these are very different. OG Dalton killed in a straightforward manner of self-defense. It was kill or be killed. Elwood Dalton over here, though, or New Dalton, Well, he killed a man because he lost control. He killed a man because he was angry. That's very different. You see, OG Dalton's ability to control himself emotionally and regulate himself emotionally and still feel emotions is part of what makes his masculinity positive. But over here, we have new Dalton, who is dealing with a classically toxic masculine element, which is his inability to control his rage. The question is, does he overcome his rage? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. But allow me to continue. Meanwhile, over here with Patrick Swayze's OG Dalton, essentially things start to escalate. And eventually the bad guys start leaning on him pretty hard. And he gets his mentor to come down and help him out. And at first that seems like a good idea. And then the bad guys blow up that hardware store I was talking about earlier. The guy who owns it's alive. The bad guys then drive a monster truck, fucking monster truck, through a car lot to punish the owners of the car lot for potentially conspiring against them. Because the main bad guy in this movie is essentially running a protection scheme where he extracts money from the business owners in the town to like invest in the town. But like, it's not like they have a choice but to pay him. So the bad guys start stepping on him. And it just keeps escalating. And it escalates to the point where they blow up the farmhouse of the farmer, who he manages to save. And at this point, Dalton is pretty down for revenge. Like, he's starting to lose it. Because innocent people are being treated with incredible injustice and cruelty. And he is starting to lose it. And he ends up killing one of the main henchmen. So far, the only person he's killed in the movie. Now, the nurse lady, she's pretty horrified by this. And, she leaves. Next thing he knows, the bad guys are calling him up and they're saying, hey, who would you rather we killed? The nurse or your mentor? And he doesn't choose anyone. So the bad guy flips a coin and says, I'll let you know how it turns out. Of course, they ultimately kill his mentor. And now he knows that he can't walk away. Because he was about to walk away. He was going to walk away from the violence. He was about to choose to walk away from the violence. And Wade agreed. Him and Wade agreed that it was time to get out. That this whole situation was getting out of control, becoming violent and dangerous. It was time to walk away like a man. But no good mentor can survive a kung fu movie. So they kill him. Once this happens, it's too much. You see, because the things that make OG Dalton angry are the injustice. The injustice and the cruelty. These things make him sick. And so he goes, and of course has his final confrontation with Mr. I think it's Bentley. I don't remember. Just old rich white guy. Well, he's not really that old. He's more like middle-aged. But Dalton goes, and they have a fight. And they have a moment. And there's a moment where Dalton has his hand ready to do his Mortal Kombat style finishing move of ripping out a motherfucker's throat. And Dalton stops himself. And he doesn't do it. And he steps away. Not going to kill any more people. It's time to walk away. He doesn't need to murder this man now that he's disarmed. As he turns, the bad guy reaches for the gun, and now this is where normally in most Hollywood movies the good guy would swing around and get that morally free kill. However, Dalton doesn't have to. The townspeople shoot the bad guy. The townspeople show up to support Dalton, to free themselves from their oppressor. It's actually kind of woke like that. And Dalton gets to show that deep down inside he can control it, that he can walk away from violence when need be. It's a great moment. Now, to be fair, the townspeople shooting the bad guy is, of course, Hollywood still not be able to get around the idea that you can let people live. But our hero gets to show himself that he can turn it off. Now let's get back to this one. Because, and this is important, Roadhouse 2 doesn't have that moment. Roadhouse 2 does not have that moment. Specifically the moment where he turns it off. There's no confrontation. There's no self-confrontation here. He doesn't do that. Now, to be fair, the person he stabs multiple times with pieces of broken bamboo, or chair legs, maybe, I'm not sure, ends up surviving, but he don't know that. He does not know that that character has survived to set up a sequel. Because, of course, it can't be standalone like the original. There was a sequel, but it was made in the 2000s. His character never shows us if he can turn it off. He doesn't have the opportunity to walk away from the kill. He doesn't have that moment. And when he leaves, it's to run from the police. Now, to be fair, Dalton also has to leave, but we witness the town covering for him. And Roadhouse 2, the other issue I take with it is that the moment is not quite as clear. But maybe the moment is clearer here as to why he almost walks away. In Dalton, we can see that he's being pushed in a certain direction, that philosophically he is morally realizing that maybe he can't save the day and that violence will only beget more violence. And then, of course, Wade, his mentor, dies. And the cruelty is too much for him. But over here, it's not quite as clear both why he pulls back or why he comes back in. Well, that's not true. I know why he comes back in. He comes back in for revenge because they burned down the bookstore, which sort of replaces the hardware store in this version. Side note, the bar in the original movie is actually called the Double Deuce. Don't know why they call it Roadhouse in this one. But Elwood here, I think he almost walks away because of the story he's told by the villain of this movie, who is different than the villain of this movie, because the villain of this movie is like a young, rich, maybe possibly crypto dude whose father used to be rich but then went to jail for things that actually sounded similar for what the bad guy in this movie was doing. This movie also has Conor McGregor in it as like a total psychopath, and I don't know how I feel about Conor McGregor's acting. I somehow doubt he has a lot of range, but he plays Psycho pretty good. He never has his moment. Jake Gyllenhaal's Dalton never has his moment. And I think that can only mean that the writers of the new Roadhouse just didn't get the most interesting things about Dalton in old Roadhouse. It's true that they're both violent men who preach kindness. That's true. That they nail that in both those characters. But there's also some more differences than that. You see, Dalton here, OG Dalton, Patrick Swayze's Dalton is a learned man, a sensitive man, a caring but stoic man who has a very dry sense of humor. Jake Gyllenhaal's guy, we don't know if he's educated because they never talk about it. The only book he reads is the one they give him on Florida. He's a violent man. He's a dirty man. He's not a very clean-cut man. Although, in fairness, he doesn't smoke cigarettes, which OG Dalton does. It was the 80s, people. I don't know what to tell you. But Jake Gyllenhaal's Elwood Dalton, he's not a bad guy. But he doesn't have his shit together. OG Dalton is a man who has his shit together. Now, to be fair, part of how he got his shit together was by being a minimalist who didn't own a lot of possessions. Elwood Dalton, it seems like his lack of possessions is more of a financial situation. At its core, these two guys are only superficially dealing with the same thing, which is the guilt of killing someone else and then having to resort to violence. Those are the only things they have in common in terms of their journey through the movie. Dalton is an ethical good person who is pushed too far. When we see Jake Gyllenhaal's character get pushed too far, he goes dark fast. Punches a dude in the throat and then watches him drown in the pool. Now, in fairness, he does let the comic relief villain go. Played by, what's his name? Something Castro. He's a pretty funny guy. I've seen him in a few things now. But I just don't see the resolution of his journey. And maybe it's because it's planned to be a franchise. That's the reason I assume Conor McGregor lives. But that's probably a mistake. And I don't mean it being a franchise. I mean as in not giving him a real journey. I mean, he kind of has a journey. But this movie, the OG Dalton here, like, has a full journey. The moment where he doesn't rip out the final guy's throat is the conclusion of that journey to redemption. It is the moment where he can finally confirm to himself that he's not just a murderer. Because when given the option to kill, he chooses not to. But Jake Gyllenhaal's Elwood Dalton doesn't have any of that. That never happens. He does not experience that. There is no closure to his story. His arc leaves him in roughly the same place he was before, except now he knows he can be a bouncer. So what are my final thoughts here? Well, I think that, honestly, the original Roadhouse is great. It's really great. It's cheesy 80s B-movie stuff, sure. But I genuinely do think that this is the positive masculinity that our society needs nowadays. Because he's like the antithesis of Andrew Tate. Respectful to women. Got an education. Philosophically knows what he's talking about. He's not demanding of people. He has his shit together. He's not pushing some incredibly materialist anything on people. Jake Gyllenhaal's Roadhouse is fine. It's got better action. I objectively like the location better. It's got a fine cast. They both have fine casts, by the way. Although original Roadhouse kind of wastes Keith David in a very minor role. But you know, still cool he was there. Just wish they gave him more to do. They both have good casts. New Roadhouse is fine. It's an entertaining little action brawler that'll give you some of the Jason Statham-y knocking people on their asses martial arts fun that you want. This movie, though, this OG Roadhouse, I'd pick it over this one. No offense to Jake Gyllenhaal, who is doing a great job, to be honest. I think it's really the writing and directing that failed to deliver some of what Dalton really needed. But yeah, no. Roadhouse 1 is a classic, and I highly recommend. New Roadhouse is fine. It's fine. It's on Amazon Prime. It's you want to see some people kung fu the shit out of each other, or I should say mixed martial arts the shit out of each other, then if you got Amazon Prime already, you might as well watch it. But this classic over here is also on Amazon Prime. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you had a lovely time. I hope it made you think about the movies Roadhouse. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Maybe click on that bell. You can also follow me on Spotify. And if you wish to contact the program, you can email me at rubenuncut@gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful whatever, wherever, whoever you are.